When Joe first emailed me what this was about, I was pretty stumped to come up with something that nobody knows about Marquette. So I actually kind of said, I don't know, maybe not. And then he called me back and said, come on, you got to do something. And I came up with something that I think is even going to stump our 5 presenters tonight. Okay, so try to do that. And as you see, I gave you a little happy anniversary because that's why we're here today. And I'm going to talk about the effects of Dearborn, Michigan. And you probably know this guy, but compared to what I'm about to tell you about Dearborn, he's a lightweight here in Marquette. Henry Ford, that's Henry Ford, you guys, and he's from Dearborn. Dearborn is my hometown. It's 480 miles from here, but it had a big influence on Marquette. We'll get to him. Using my high school yearbooks, just 5 years. Actually, I'm going to also talk about 68 and 74, but this is where I thought I'm going to stump everybody here, okay? And you can see what my high school name was, Etzel Ford, because that's what Dearborn was all about. 1968, we had a great football player at Etzel Ford. His name was Craig Peck. And Craig Peck was one of the first ones to come up here from Marquette that I knew about. And one of his buddies told us all about, go to Marquette. There's a school up there. They made the Playboy top 10 party schools. So Cindy and I were up here in a heartbeat. But according to Dan Truckee, that is a myth. So now you know another thing. He went through every Playboy to figure that out. For high school shout out of one of my yearbooks. Because I don't have the 68 yearbook of Craig Peck. So Craig Peck came to Marquette and he opened up a business. It's called Lake Superior Pizza and Sub Company. And he sold more Rollin' Pops than Henry Ford sold Model Ts. How many high schoolers had a Rollin' Pop in their lifetime? Okay? So this is a company that is still in business today in Marquette. How many years? Over probably 45 years, started by a guy from my high school, Craig Peck. And I tell you, a Rollin' Pop, I was telling Josh, my son-in-law, about this, and when he was in school, they were like $1.50 or something like that. So now they're $6. Okay, 1969, there are 3 future Yoopers in this photograph. This is my 10th grade wrestling team. I wrestled for 3 years, as did one of my best friends, Al Taylor, who's here today. That's me right there. Let's see if this thing's gonna shine. It's a laser light, it doesn't shine on that. Yeah, it doesn't work on see, I'm used to screens. That's me in the center with the glasses, okay? And this is my buddy Al Taylor. Al's here today, and we're going to talk about high school had such an influence on both of us, and to appreciate your high school. Appreciate what you learn there and how it can change your life, because Al Taylor moved to Marquette, and he opened up tailor-made furniture. Al is one of the best cabinet makers here in Marquette. He's sitting at that table. And Al used to be in all the shop classes. Industrial arts was Al's thing. And he has changed Marquette. He is still in business today, kind of laying off now, because I want to fish with him way more. But Al Taylor is in this shot. And there's another future Yooper that's right here. And this is Kim Van Osdell. Kim and his brother Dirk. Here's Kim's high school picture, Kim Van Osdell. And his brother Dirk, who is also here today, was in one of my high school yearbooks. Sorry, Dirk. These two were both incredible bankers here in Marquette. They would put Mr. Kaufman, Louis Kaufman, to shame with the banking skills. Kim Van Osdell is still a president in a bank in Iron Mountain now, right?
Yeah.
And Dirk, you spent how many years at Wells Fargo and First National?
18.
18. Okay, so banking geniuses. And Kim was right here in this shot when I was at college. Kim was at college at the same time I was. And there's Kim Van Osdell. There's Jeff Weston. You know Jeff? He's a fireman in town. This is Craig Macbeth. He was in my high school, Etzel Ford, in my wrestling team too. So here's Kim and Craig Macbeth. And who knows who this is? That is Howard Schultz, one of the richest men in the world. He was here at my high school. I mean, at my college. And Kim is the one who shared this picture with me of Howard Schultz. And there's not many pictures of Howard Schultz at Northern. I just gave Northern my collection of Howard Schultz pictures. Because he might be president. Nah, he's not going to be president. Uh-oh, I might sleep on the couch tonight. There are two future Yoopers in this photo. One is my wife, Cindy. And you know, our wives made big impacts here too. Cindy taught in the schools for 35 years. And this is, oh my God, I'm spacing out.
Marion Shaffron.
Marion Shaffron. Marion Shaffron came to Marquette. She married Scott Lindquist. They opened up Lindquist Sports right down from my studio. So I was always getting good deals on fishing and hunting equipment because I went to high school with Marion Shaffron. And there's Cindy Gill. So another impact of Marquette. Now what happened to Lindquist Sports? It became Carpenters, Outdoor Sports, and then Gander moved to town. And nobody could compete with Gander. So we could still have these sporting goods shops downtown if things didn't change here. All right, who else are we going to roast? This is Davey Lee Burton. You've seen his trucks all over Marquette, okay? In my high school, Dan Liebert has been in business for 28 years. How many of you had Danny do your floors? Look at this. And Danny's wife, Carmi, there's Danny, there's Carmi. 28 years he's had this, they're in my high school yearbooks. Carmi's also from Dearborn, also from Etzel Ford, also worked in a doctor's office for some 30-some years, still working today, and Danny's still working today too. So Dearborn people have been around. And his sister is Diane Liebert. Diane Liebert married Terry Guilfoy, and they have a business. Okay? How many years has this been around? 40-some years from my high school. They're brother and sister. That's Diane Liebert. She is now Diane Guilfoy. And how many people know this amazing spot? Wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Dearborn, Michigan. And they are a fun couple. You want to see a fun couple. Nora, this was at your wedding. And I could tell you the story about what happened about 4 hours later to these two people. But that's Terry Guilfoy and Diane Liebert, Diane Guilfoy, who are still in business today, also 40-some years. This is my high school, Etzel Ford. That's my high school photography teacher, Lee Bartlett. And Lee Bartlett taught for about 18 years at Etzel Ford. I had him in 1971 is when I graduated. He died in 1972. And I didn't know that until I was going through these yearbooks. And this guy changed my life. Another guy who you might remember here in Marquette is Bill Sampson. He's in my high school. He was in the yearbook staff. I was on the newspaper staff. Bill Sampson, do you remember Bill? How many of you knew Bill and worked in the Marquette Arts Council, the Oasis Gallery? He was taught by Lee Bartlett about photography. In fact, I got this picture from him, and he had the autograph on it. He had Lee Bartlett autograph this before he died. I'm getting a little verklempt. So Bill Sampson, Etzel Ford. And then, of course, you got me in my high school. I was on the Bolt staff. That's our high school newspaper. I was a sports page editor and also did a lot of photography work. So this is me in high school. And I mean, none of this would have happened in my career if I didn't have Etzel Ford. And I want to show you something right here. That's a camera, a little box camera I had with me. And this is one of, before Photoshop, Mr. Bartlett had to fix this picture. If you look real close, I'm giving the finger in this picture. Go back. I was a rascal, wasn't I? So you can just see just some of the influence that it had. But before we're done here, I do have to talk about, oh yeah, I got one more couple. We opened up in 1978 above Donkers, Cindy and myself, and Marcia Mikowski and Mike DeMera, both from Dearborn. Mike, I grew up with Mike since 5th grade. And they moved up with us and they started Superior View Stained Glass. Now they didn't last long. Doing contemporary glass in Marquette in the 1980s wasn't going over real big. But their pieces are still all over town. In fact, and there they are. That's Mike, and there's Marcia, there's me and Cindy. That's Ingrid Donkers, her son Frank Donkers, and his son Tommy Donkers. 1980, that picture was taken. But they built the largest stained glass window ever created in the UP. And you can still see it today at the Ski Hall of Fame in Ishpeming. And it says Mike DeMera and Marcia Mikowski. There's a plaque. They're from Dearborn, Michigan. And this is a big mirror of the UP. It's all done in mirror. And this is all copper. The leaves of the trees and all that, they have copper wire coming out of this. It's one of the most beautiful pieces. And it was first put in the Marquette General Hospital. It was in their lobby for years. And when they remodeled, they gave it to the Ski Hall of Fame. But we built this up above Donker's Candy Store in 9 different panels. And this gives you an idea how big it was and how hard it was to hoist this thing up. So one more couple. Now see, I gave you 6 or 7 stories you didn't know about. But just to finish, one more about Dearborn. This is an amazing photograph. I was born in Henry Ford Hospital. I was then brought home to a Ford home built in 1920 in West Dearborn. It was for the tractor plant. When the Fordson tractor came out, Henry Ford built all these homes in Dearborn. So I lived in a Ford home. My mom retired from Ford's after 25 years. My dad, when he retired, worked for Henry Ford Museum as a security guard for 10 years. I went to Henry Ford Community College before I came to Northern. So there's a little bit of Ford history here. But what's amazing about this photo is the Ford Rotunda. The Ford Rotunda was built for the World's Fair in Chicago in 1933. And then it was moved to Dearborn. This is the Ford administration building that was replaced now by what's called the Glass House, and that is the Rouge Plant. This is the largest industrial plant in the world when it was built in 1917 and 1920. I had to work there while I was in college. My brothers had to work there. I had to be there at 6 o'clock because I had to park here, and I think I worked about right there. It'd take me a half hour to work to where I was going. So if you want to have your kids go to college, put them in an assembly line at a place like the Rouge Plant, and they'll go to college, believe me. The Rouge Plant, or the Rotunda, had 1.5 million visitors a year through the 1940s and 50s. This is where we saw Santa Claus. This is where, amazing. And in 1962, when I was in 4th grade, my dad was standing in the hallway of our school, and I didn't know what he was going to why he was at the school. He was in East Dearborn when this started to burn. And he came to tell us at our school. He called me out of class. I'm like freaking out. I'm like in 4th grade. And he said, Jack, the Rotunda has burned. And that's the Rotunda. Because it was shaped like that, it was gone in 1 hour. It was like a furnace. And the top was being restored, and they were putting tar, and one of the buckets fell over, and that thing burned down. But this was one of the greatest things in Dearborn. 1.5 million visitors. It was the 5th largest tourist attraction in the U.S. behind Niagara Falls, all these things. And there's the Rouge Plant in Dearborn. Now, the connection with Marquette and that Rouge Plant is in this very building. Henry Ford had things built for this Rouge Plant because they could build some of the largest equipment in this building, and then when they moved up in the 1920s to the other Lakeshore building, Henry Ford had stuff shipped to Dearborn all the time. And when he came to the UP and he owned 600,000 acres, he had sawmills that were selling or shipping the wood back to Dearborn from the UP to build Model Ts, because a Model T needed 200 board feet of wood in each car. So what a connection between Marquette. He comes up here and he buys 600,000 acres, has sawmills, and all that was going back to Dearborn. Besides things made in this building that was also being shipped to Dearborn. Lots of things, because they could build huge things that were used in the plant. And of course, Ford was in Marquette a lot. Here he is. This is on one of the tables over here. That's Burt Watt. He was in charge of Lakeshore. Henry Ford came to Marquette and got a tour of it, and that's what this photo is. But he was in Marquette a lot, and when he came to Marquette, he had a friend named Bishop Ablewhite. Bishop Ablewhite lived on Cedar and Arch Street, and when Ford came, he stayed with the Ablewhites. Now, do you know that story? Bishop Ablewhite, the Episcopal priest, or bishop from the St. Paul's Episcopal. He was sentenced to Jackson Prison for 2 to 10 years for operating with gangsters in Chicago. They lost $100,000 out of the Marquette account. And one of the reasons the Opera House burned down in 1938, they say, was to hide the records that was in the safe. And it was the only one. This is all true, you guys. So Bishop Applewhite was Henry Ford's best friend, and he was sentenced to Jackson Prison for 2 to 10 years because, I mean, he had strippers, he had all this alcohol, and he was in Chicago, and he went to prison. So here's the story I just learned as I was researching this. When Bishop Applewhite got out of prison after only 9 months, Henry Ford hired him as the personnel director for the Rouge Plant. Honest to God. So there you go. There's my talk.